The terminal was too bright, too loud, too alive. People rushed past with rolling suitcases and paper cups steaming in their hands, voices overlapping into a blur of departures and arrivals. Yet she stood still, as if caught in a pause the world refused to honor. Her fingers clutched a small suitcase, the leather handle worn and cracked. The weight of it didn't come from clothes inside it, came from the silence she carried, heavy and merciless. A red scarf dangled from the zipper, tugged faintly by the draft every time the automatic doors slid open. She kept her eyes fixed on the giant departure board. But she wasn't reading it. She wasn't waiting for a flight. She was searching for something else, something that couldn't be written in glowing yellow letters. Her lips parted as if to whisper, but the sound was lost to the roar of strangers. "Don't look back," she thought. The words came sharp, almost like a voice, not her own, but her body betrayed her. Her head tilted, her gaze drifting toward the stream of people emerging from the escalator. Faces she didn't know, faces that blurred. And then one face she thought she'd never see again. Her chest tightened. She inhaled too quickly, choking on the taste of recycled airport air. Her hands trembled against the handle of the suitcase, the scarf brushing against her wrist like a reminder, like blood. The man didn't notice her, not yet. His stride was confident, careless, his phone pressed to his ear. She traced the sharp line of his jaw, the way he brushed his hand through his hair, an ordinary gesture. But to her, it was a wound ripped open. Her cracked watch ticked, faintly, an impatient heartbeat on her wrist. It had stopped once, years ago. At the exact minute, everything inside her collapsed. She never fixed it. She wore it like a scar. And now, as his figure drew closer, she felt that frozen time pressing against her skin, demanding breath. She shifted, her body angled slightly away, but her eyes didn't release him, not yet. The suitcase seemed heavier, the scarf brighter, the watch colder. The noise of the terminal dimmed until it was only his footsteps echoing in her chest. For a moment, she wondered if he could feel it too. That invisible thread, stretched, thin, pulling the past into the present. Her throat burned, her hand tightened until her knuckles paled. "Not today," she whispered, though the sound drowned beneath the rushing crowd. But her eyes promised otherwise. And when he finally turned his head, when his gaze swept near enough to brush against hers, the world felt like it stopped just for a breath. Just for the moment before everything shattered. The scarf slipped against her wrist again, catching in the draft of another opening door. She tightened her hold on the suitcase, though her hands already ached. The cracked leather pressed into her palm, familiar and foreign, all at once. She had carried this suitcase years ago, when she was still a girl trailing behind her father, at the train station. "Hold it tight," he had said, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. "The world takes things from you if you don't." She remembered his laugh, the kind that filled spaces, the kind that promised she would never be alone. And yet here she was alone, in a place overflowing with people, holding the same object, but with no one waiting for her on the other side. A family nearby collided in embraces, their laughter spilling over like sunlight breaking through glass. A little girl wrapped herself around her mother's legs, her hair tangled, her shoes untied. The sight carved something sharp in her chest. She turned away too quickly, blinking back the sting in her eyes. Her suitcase thudded against her leg. When she shifted, the sound dull and heavy, like the heartbeat she tried to silence. That red scarf, it wasn't fashion, it was memory. A gift from someone who once called her beautiful in winter. Someone whose absence had hollowed her into this version of herself. She wanted to tear it off, throw it onto the ground, but her hands stayed frozen. Rage and longing stitched it too tightly to her. She felt his presence before she allowed her gaze to find him. The man from the escalator. He had slowed his stride, lingering at a distance just beyond her shoulder, not approaching, not leaving, just there, watching. Her skin prickled. She didn't need to see his face to know. His silence was deliberate, as if he wanted her to feel it, wanted her to wonder. She shifted again, pretending to scan the departure board, but the words blurred. What she read instead were debts unpaid, nights curled on a mattress too thin for comfort, meals skipped to make the rent stretch. The kind of survival that demanded more than resilience. It demanded proof. Proof that she was stronger than what broke her. Proof that she could take back what was stolen. Her watch ticked faintly again, though the hands still pointed to the wrong time. The frozen hour. The hour she stopped being who she was. She exhaled sharply, turning her body just enough that their eyes could finally, briefly, catch. His lips parted as though he might speak, but no sound came. She should have walked away. She should have kept moving toward the gate, but her feet betrayed her. They stalled. And in that small pause, her hesitation, his mouth curved. Not into recognition, not into warmth, but into a slow, confused smile that made the air between them thrum with something dangerous, something unfinished. The loudspeaker cracked overhead, announcing a delayed flight. A collective sigh rippled through the crowd, frustration and impatience filling the air. She gripped the suitcase tighter, though her body screamed for her to move, to leave, to run. But she didn't. Her eyes lingered on him, stealing fragments she wasn't supposed to see. His shoes, scuffed and tired, carried the weight of too many roads. His coat hung unevenly, one button missing, the fabric frayed near the cuffs, not the picture of power she once imagined him to be. When he shifted, reaching into his pocket, she caught the edge of a photo sticking from his wallet. A boy's face, blurred by time, smiled faintly from the glossy paper. Her throat tightened. A son, a brother, or a ghost of his own. She hated the recognition pressing against her chest, hated the way her anger faltered for just a heartbeat. She had believed she was the only one haunted. But now she wondered. The windows rattled softly as rain began tapping against the glass panes of the terminal. Thunder rolled far in the distance, low and slow, like something building too heavy to be contained. The scarf brushed her wrist again, red against her pale skin, and she remembered how color once meant warmth. Now it meant warning. She turned, slightly, as though to test her own strength. Her cracked watch gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, frozen in the moment her world had collapsed. She thought of leaving, boarding the next train, vanishing into another city, burying the past once more. But the pull was relentless. Her gaze snapped back to him. He wasn't speaking, not reaching out, but watching her with an intensity that burned. There was no recognition in his eyes, and yet there was something else, a kind of searching, as if he too carried questions too heavy to ask. Inside her, war raged. The part of her carved hollow by betrayal screamed to strike, to take the revenge she had polished sharp in her mind for years. But another voice, quiet, almost unfamiliar, whispered of hesitation. What if he was broken too? What if pain wasn't just hers to own? The rain thickened, drumming harder against the glass, drowning out even the announcements overhead. She imagined it washing the entire terminal away, leaving only the two of them standing in the echo of what they couldn't say. Her suitcase slipped slightly from her grip, thudding against the floor. The sound made him glance just for a second, his expression flickering between curiosity and recognition. She froze. He took one step closer. And in that step, suspended in the rhythm of rain and silence, everything she thought she knew blurred into something terrifyingly uncertain. The storm outside pressed harder, its shadows spilling across the glass, as if the sky itself carried their weight. The terminal lights flickered once, briefly, and the crowd grew restless. Voices rose, feet shuffled, and still she stood anchored between departure and decision. Her breath trembled. She shifted the suitcase to her other hand, but the leather burned against her palm. She thought of walking away, of letting the tide of people swallow her whole. For a moment, she even turned, her shoes clicking softly toward the gate. But something caught her. The scarf. It had loosened, sliding halfway free from the zipper. In that same second, a sudden draft from the doors pulled it completely, sending the strip of red cloth fluttering across the polished floor. Gasps came from strangers as it slipped between hurried footsteps, nearly trampled, nearly lost. She froze. Before she could move, he bent, quick, steady, deliberate. His hand reached the scarf before the crowd could crush it. He stood, holding it loosely, the crimson fabric bleeding against his fingers. For a moment, time bent around that image, the man who had once destroyed her, cradling the one object that carried her hurt. He didn't speak, didn't smile. He only held it out, as if unsure whether to give it back or let it fall. Her chest ached. She didn't move to take it, though every eye nearby seemed to turn, curious. A woman brushing past muttered under her breath, "Some people carry more than just bags. They carry silence." The words clung to the air like smoke. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "Why is she just standing there?" The mother shushed her, but not before the judgment had landed, small and sharp. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to throw the suitcase, to let the scarf burn in the rain. Instead, she took one step forward, her hand hovering near his. His gaze didn't waver. There was no apology in it, no arrogance either, just something unreadable, something that pulled and repelled all at once. The watch on her wrist ticked faintly again, though it had not ticked in years. A phantom sound, a ghost. She swore she felt it vibrating against her skin, reminding her of every reason she had to hate, every reason she had to stay. She reached hand, then stopped. Her fingers curled back, refusing the scarf, refusing him. The air between them thickened with all the words neither of them dared to say. And though the scarf trembled in his grip, as if caught between them, neither moved. Her lips parted, but only silence escaped, and silence, once again, became everything. The scarf still hung between them, fragile in his hand. The crowd moved around like a restless tide, but neither of them broke the stillness. She told herself to leave, to vanish into the storm, but something shifted when he finally tucked the scarf into his palm, almost reverently, as though it were not hers at all but his. Confusion rippled through her chest. Then she saw it, the faint embroidery on the corner, threads nearly worn away. LD. She had never questioned those initials before, assuming them random, meaningless. But now she caught the flicker in his eyes, the hesitation carved into his jaw. Lena, he whispered, so softly she wasn't sure if he meant for her to hear. Her pulse hammered. A name she didn't know, but one he clearly did. Her mind scrambled. The scarf she had carried like a wound was not just hers, it had belonged to someone else first, someone who had touched him too. Someone lost. And then the other truth snapped into place, merciless and sharp. She had seen his name earlier, printed cold on the company letterhead in the office where she'd dropped her application last week. The new job, the one she prayed would end the months of skipped meals and whispered rent notices. His name sat at the top. He wasn't just a man from her past, he was the one holding her future. The suitcase trembled against her leg. She remembered her father's words again, looping back like an echo. Hold it tight. The world takes things from you if you don't. She had held tight, but still the world. This man had taken everything. And yet here he was, standing with her scarf in his hand, with the power to erase her survival or secure it. Revenge tasted closer than it ever had, and so did ruin. The rain outside clattered louder, as though the sky itself pressed her forward. Her breath broke. A near sob lodged in her throat. She wanted to tear the scarf from him, scream the truth of what he had done, but her feet moved differently. Instead, she followed the pull toward the glass doors on the far side of the terminal, where security gates glowed faintly under harsh lights. Every step was a refusal to turn back. Every step meant there would be no undoing, no forgiveness, no safe ground left. She did not look over her shoulder as she walked, though she felt his eyes burning into her spine. The suitcase dragged heavy behind, the watch pressed cold against her skin, the scarf still missing from her grip. She reached the threshold of the waiting room, the place where departures became final, and as the door slid open, the storm's roar swallowed her whole. She stepped inside. The waiting room was colder, quieter. Rainwater streaked down the wide glass walls, turning the outside world into a blur of silver. She stood near the edge, suitcase at her side, her reflection fractured across the pane. The red scarf was gone, but its absence screamed louder than color ever could. She pressed her palm against the cracked watch, feeling the weight of that frozen hour again. It had always been a reminder of loss until now. Now, it ticked faintly in her mind, as if insisting, time does not stay still. Neither can you. The door opened. His footsteps echoed behind her. She did not turn, not at first. She wanted the sound to carry, wanted to feel what it was like to be the one waited for, the one followed. Why are you here? Her voice cracked like glass. His silence stretched until she thought he might leave. But then, softly, he said, because you remind me of her. She turned then, sharply, fury blooming hot in her chest. He held the scarf carefully, the fabric trembling in his hand. Lena, my daughter. She wore this the winter before he stopped, swallowing the rest. His eyes, usually sharp, carried something else now, something raw. You carry her fire, her silence. That's why I couldn't walk away. The world spun, her anger colliding with confusion. She wanted to scream at him, to say he had no right to stand here with grief when he had already taken so much from her. But the scarf, its weight was different now, not just hers, not just pain shared. The suitcase handle slipped from her grip, thudding onto the floor. For a moment, she thought of her father's voice again, hold it tight. But maybe holding too tight was what had broken her. She stepped forward. Slowly, she reached for the scarf. He did not resist, only let it slide into her hand, as though releasing something he had carried too long. She wound it once around her wrist, not to bind her, but to remind her, to mark the end of one silence and the beginning of another. "I should hate you," she whispered. "You do." His answer was calm, steady. "But hate isn't all you are." The words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. The loudspeaker announced boarding. A tide of passengers began filing through the gate. Glancing briefly at the two of them, the girl with her trembling scarf, the man with his haunted silence, judgment lingered in their looks, but neither moved. Finally, she bent, lifting the suitcase again. She did not wait for him to follow, did not ask if he would. She walked toward the gate, the scarf brushing her skin like a final goodbye. The opening image returned in reverse, no longer a girl frozen in place while the world rushed around her, but a girl walking forward as the world paused. Watching. She did not look back, because not every stranger you help is meant to stay. But some leave. You changed forever. The city had grown quieter after the storm. Streets glistened under dim lamplight, puddles reflecting broken shapes of neon and sky. She walked alone, her suitcase lighter now, though its weight hadn't changed. What had shifted was inside. Her the silence she carried felt less like a wound and more like a space she could finally breathe in. The scarf was no longer wound tight around her wrist. Instead, it lay folded in the top drawer of a desk in the small apartment she returned to. She didn't hide it. She didn't bury it. She placed it gently under a lamp where the soft glow touched its threads. A reminder, but not a chain. Her cracked watch remained on her wrist. It still pointed to that frozen hour, the one that had defined her for so long. She didn't fix it. Maybe she never would. But when she looked at it now, she no longer heard only endings. She also heard echoes of beginnings, the subtle hum of time, insisting that even broken clocks mark something worth remembering. She made tea, though she didn't drink it. The steam curled in the small kitchen, blurring the window where the rain traced slow rivers downward. She sat at the table, her hands clasped loosely, and for the first time in years, she let herself be still without fearing the stillness. Her father's words lingered again, but softer this time, like a memory leaning close. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. Recognition. That was what had shaken her most, not the past she thought she wanted to destroy, but the unexpected reflection she found in him. His grief had mirrored her own, his silence echoing hers. Hate had brought her to the edge, but recognition had pulled her back. She wasn't healed. Healing wasn't a finish line, but she had stepped into something she hadn't touched in years, a fragile kind of strength that asked nothing of anyone but herself. Through the window, the night opened wide, indifferent and infinite. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and let her breath fog the surface. For a fleeting second, she imagined another hand on the other side, but she didn't linger. She drew her hand back, and the fog faded, leaving the world sharp and real again. The scarf stayed in the drawer, the suitcase by the door, the watch on her wrist. Not everything was meant to be resolved. Some things remained unfinished, uncertain, alive. And maybe that was the point. Because sometimes the heaviest truths aren't carried to closure, they are carried forward.